The latest on the Harris campaign. I want to welcome in a former White House advisor for the Trump administration and host of Newsmax's own The Gorka Reality Check, Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, I first want to get your reaction to what we just heard from the command sergeant major on Governor Walz and talking about Walz abandoning his battalion and what that did to his unit. Do you think Walz addresses any of this head on? Because I have to think this story isn't going away.
I think you're right. I think it's not going away. I think this guy will probably be jettisoned before the convention. This is a guy who's been caught repeatedly. Just go to my Twitter feed on C-SPAN, on testimony in the House, talking about how, he knows what PTSD is like because, his unit deployed. And he's always very crafty with the words he uses. He doesn't say, I stood there in Afghanistan. He said, we deployed in support of OEF. Yeah, you deployed to Italy and were sipping cappuccinos in the piazza. That's as close as you got to Afghanistan. And then when he says, this is the kind of weapon of war that I carried in war, never, ever happened. So this is classic stolen valor. He leveraged his service in the National Guard to forward his political career. But the big story that nobody's talking about, the real buried lead, as journalists say, is this is a guy who was in the National Guard for 24 years and then visited communist China 31 times while he was in the military, lived there for a year during the Tiananmen Square massacre, got married on the anniversary of the massacre, and honeymooned in communist China. What is a person who serves in the U.S. military doing hanging out in communist China so many times? I had a clearance in the White House. I still have a clearance today. I couldn't just go and live in communist China unless I were working for the DIA or being debriefed every time I went. So the buried story is, what's Tim Walz's connection to communist China?
It's all very odd, and yet he wants to call J.D. Vance weird. So as we know, J.D. Vance was hot on the media trail yesterday, going on 3 different Sunday shows. Donald Trump has an interview tonight with Elon Musk. Even President Biden sitting down with CBS Sunday Morning. But we're on day 22 since Kamala Harris entered this race. She says she may do an interview by the end of the month. Why is mainstream media letting her get away with not doing interviews?
Because they're political prostitutes. I mean, let's be clear. The mainstream lying legacy media is a branch of the DNC. How do we know that? You don't need conspiracy theories. Wind the clock back, 7 days, 6 days. Suddenly, every show on mainstream legacy media says what? J.D. Vance has a weird problem. He's weird. Did you know J.D. Vance is weird? I mean, literally, the talking points are sent by email to the cable news channels, to the propagandists, to the show hosts, and they say the same thing again and again and again. They're not media. They're a propaganda branch of the DNC. That's why they are vested in having Kamala Harris maintain power. Why? Because they're all one big left-wing amoeba. That's all they are.
You're exactly right. All right, Dr. Gorka, thanks so much for waking up and joining me this morning. Appreciate it.
God bless. Thank you, guys.